Hi, it's Ed, and welcome to episode 2 of Cracking the Codex for Codex Necrons. This week we are going to be looking at the Canoptek Court. I think it's a great one to start with. It is basically the one that you want to play all the good stuff in it. How are you feeling about Canoptek Court, John?
Yeah, pretty good. It's not my default detachment I've explored, but I have been playing some of it just because it feels like a pretty good toolkit to use already. So it's a nice one to kind of drill into and figure out because I think we'll see a lot of it, especially on the competitive scene. So it's kind of good to understand your enemy at least.
It really is. It's going to be something that I think if you go to an event, at least for the next month or two, we're going to see almost entirely Canoptek Court. And then 3-4 months down the line, we'll see people start to experiment with the other things. Maybe the mission play aspect of Hypercrypt becomes really good. Maybe the meta changes and something else becomes really good. But it's a great place to start. You can't go wrong by taking it because it buffs up all the things that you want to be playing anyway. So, detachment trait. What you get is called your power matrix. The power matrix is at all times your units get reroll 1 to hit. That's a flat bonus, always on. Then, if you are wholly within one of the thirds of the board, the thirds being your deployment zone, your opponent's deployment zone, or no man's land, you will get full rerolls to hit, depending on if you control half or more of the objectives in that zone at the start of the phase. It's always on in your own deployment. In no man's land, if you're holding half or more, which is usually 2 of the 3, you get full rerolls. And in your opponent's deployment zone, if you're holding their objective marker, usually just the 1, you would get full rerolls as long as you had it at the start of the phase that you're rerolling the dice in. So, stratagems. Canoptek Court has probably the best suite of stratagems that you can get in the Necron Codex. It's got offensive stratagems, it's got defensive stratagems, it's got movement shenanigans as well. It's very difficult to sort of get to grips with this army if you're across the table from it. The first two, they're both battle tactics. This is very important to note. You're going to be running overlords, the overlords with the translocation shrouds. What that gives you is it gives you a flat 6-inch advance, and it also gives you a free battle tactic stratagem every turn. So you're going to be using that. You're going to be slamming, realistically, Cynosure of Eradication every turn. What that gives you is you select a unit. It has to be wholly within your army's power matrix, easy to set up, move on to objectives in the move phase, go to the shooting phase, suddenly it turns on. Jobs are good. And you select one Cryptek or Canoptek unit from your army. Again, easy. Canoptek units are fantastic. We're looking at Wraiths particularly, and Cryptek units are great as well. That's anything you've got a Cryptek attached to. In this case, we're looking at Immortals with the Tesla, and they get devastating wounds. Huge combo. You're going to be fishing for 5s with your Plasmancer in the squad to give them sustained hits on 5s. You're going to be getting a huge amount of hits from your 20 shots. Then you're going to be fully rerolling your wounds from the datasheet ability that Immortals have when they target something on an objective. It ends up being about 11 to 12 mortal wounds when you put this on a squad of Tesla Immortals. What does that kill, John? 11 to 12 mortal wounds on a squad?
That kills.
Kills a War Dog.
Comfortably. It'd kill that or a big dent in some Terminators, perhaps.
Absolutely. And given that it's a battle tactic and you're doing it for free, it's one that you can repeat. So if you've got 2 squads of Immortals, you're going to be slamming that into, for example, an opponent's squad of Terminators, and then you're doing it again for free with your second squad. Suddenly they're down to a third of their models, for example. Very strong stratagem, probably the best offensive strat, I would say, in the game. I don't think there's anything that turbocharges your damage in a way that this does.
Combined with something that's got sustained hits 2, with full rerolls to hit, it feels
ability
terrifying.
to get lethal hits on 5s, inbuilt rerolls to wound. It's a lot. Yeah. Well, nice and easy. You're going to be slamming that every turn. Second up on the battle tactics, this isn't one that you're necessarily going to slam every turn, but it's nice to have in the back pocket. Curse the Cryptek. When one of your Crypteks dies in your opponent's shooting or fight phase, opponent's shooting phase or any fight phase, just after an enemy unit has shot or fought, you will select a... God fucking damn it.
It's alright, at least you're not my washing machine.
Right, I'm just going to go right back into it. Second battle tactic, not one that you're going to be slamming every turn. It's not really getting the benefit of the battle tactic use here, but you use it in your opponent's shooting phase or any fight phase after an enemy unit has shot or fought and destroyed a Cryptek model from your army. So that's going to be your Technomancers, your Chronomancers, your Plasmancers, realistically. And until the end of the battle, each time a friendly Canoptek model makes an attack that targets the unit that destroyed the Cryptek, you get +1 to hit, +1 to wound. Not going to come up all that much, but those sort of stratagems are always nice to have just in the case of, oh, this is a really efficient time to use it. Suddenly I can destroy their big Death Star unit with more efficiency.
Yeah, well, it's a good situation where if they've managed to precision out one of your Technomancers out of one of your other units, it then means that the unit that's then not benefiting from its defensive buffs from that Technomancer can then hit back, hopefully, and hopefully clean up.
The way that this might be good, and if you manage to say you charge in a weakened Canoptek unit, weakened Cryptek unit into something like a big knight, one of the 22 wound models, they have to activate their attacks. They kill it, you go, cool, now the rest of my army gets +1 to hit and wound against you. There is a little bit of game here, but I think it's more of like a back pocket stratagem instead of something that you're going to be using a lot. Going back to things that you might find yourself using a lot, Solar Pulse, 1 CP, start of the shooting phase, select one Cryptek model, select an objective marker within 18 inches of that Cryptek model. Until the end of the phase, all your shooting attacks from Necron models have ignore cover, targeting models that are on that objective marker. You probably want to shoot things on objectives. That's just how the game of Warhammer works. And 18 inches within range of one of your Cryptek models, that's going to be the entire board, because realistically you're going to be taking 4 or 5 Crypteks. You're going to be all over the board anyway. It's a very flexible stratagem. We have also got reactive subroutines for a single CP. This is another one that you're probably going to be getting a lot of use out of. For 1 CP, in your opponent's movement phase, just after an enemy ends a normal advance or fallback move, you select one Canoptek unit that's within 9 inches of that enemy unit, and they get to make a normal move of 6 inches. You can't move into engagement range of other models, which is important to note, but it does make it very difficult to deal with this army, especially when the units that you can move are your big 280-point bricks of wraiths, either getting them out of a dangerous charge or getting them more onto an objective. There's a lot of play with this one.
Or another good example is if, say, for example, they've come within 9 inches of a unit of Scarabs and your Immortals. Your Immortals can't move because they're not Canoptek. But those Scarabs, they can just screen forward and block the charge for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a lot of application there, and it's something that I'm quite keen to see used more in the table. It's one that I think there's a lot of skill expression that you can use, but also to play around it. For anyone wondering, if you're able to make charges into units, the best way to play around this stratagem is don't fall back the unit that's in combat with the unit that you want to, surround until everything else has moved. Then do the fallback move, get out of 9 inches, jobs are good, and they can't go anywhere. You've already moved everyone close. Something that is key to note on this one is it's a normal move of up to 6 inches. So
normal,
if you're
advance, or fallback, so the fallback doesn't work.
Well, it does if you end out of 9 inches. You've got to have something that's fast. But for example, if you're cycling war dogs into the wraiths. But so it's key to note it's a normal move of up to 6 inches. So if you've got a unit that can move less than 6 inches, it doesn't get to move the full 6. I don't think that actually comes up at all with the Canoptek Rider.
Anything's that slow.
No, just the sort of 2-legged stuff, but one to keep in mind anyway, in case there's something we've missed. The final stratagem is Suboptimal Facade. This is in your opponent's charge phase after they've declared a charge. You select one Canoptek unit that is the target of the charge and wholly within the army's power matrix, and you activate your reanimation protocols. I'm not in love with this one, but it does give you a little bit of flexibility in terms of just, if you're reanimating big valuable models, suddenly you can get more stuff on an objective, or you can potentially get a little bit more damage into the counterpunch there. It's fine.
It could be a situation where if you think on average, say you've got a unit of, say, 4 Wraiths are left, and you think on average they might kill 4 Wraiths, and then hit your Technomancer, you're like, cool, I'll reanimate, I'll bring back, especially situation if you've got no one wounded, that potentially can bring back a Wraith on 3 wounds. That then can really affect whether they can clear you. But it is very niche and kind of specific. But I have
Yeah,
seen times where it was usable, and I've done it, and it didn't help in the combat, but it could have potentially.
sure. I quite like it in situations where your opponent tries to tie you up, just sort of charges you with some chaff and hopes that that's going to, stick you in place on your turn. Getting that extra 4 attacks from, a dead wraith might be enough to swing the combat.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely got some applications. It's just not one that's anywhere near as exciting as some of the other stuff in the
Because it
detachment.
also could trigger your power matrix if it's literally the difference of the extra 2 OC as well.
That's very true. If you
Yeah.
because you reanimate onto the point, then you go to the fight phase, start the fight phase, check if you've got more objectives. If you do, suddenly you turn on your reroll. So that's a very good point. All right, enhancements. These are some bangers as well. These are pretty much all good. There's 2 that I like more. There's one that I quite like, and then there's another one that I'm like, yeah, this is fine. But they are solid. Should we just start with Dimensional Sanctum? 20 points, Cryptek model only. That unit gets infiltrate. It's incredible.
Perfect.
You just get to put a unit of wraiths wherever you want them to be, and that's the main thing. You can also put it on if you wanted to go back to running big warrior bricks, if you wanted to very aggressively try and go for an alpha strike there. I really like it on the wraiths, getting them up, because they can really tie up huge chunks of your opponent's army very early and make it so that you get the primary game really nailed down.
Yeah.
Hyperphasic Fulcrum, 15 points. When the bear is leading a unit, if they're wholly within the army's power matrix, they reroll 1s to wound. This is fine. It's a upgrade to your offensive output. The things that it's going on, I'm not super excited about getting. I'm spending 15 points on it if I have the 15 points spare, but it's probably going on wraiths. Just giving them reroll
Yeah.
1s is solidly fine. It's okay. The next one that I quite like is the Auto Divinator, 15 points. Cryptek model only. Anytime your opponent gains a CP as a result of an ability, so that's not discarding a tactical stratagem for turn. It's only if they've got, for example, Imatech, who gains you a CP every turn.
Yeah.
That sort of ability. On a 2+, you gain a CP. This is a little meta dependent. However, it's probably the best version that we've seen printed.
Especially if you're playing fixed and you haven't put Imatech in your list.
Yes, yeah. It's for 15 points you get Imatech at home. It's not as good, but it's 85 points cheaper, so it's nice to have, and I absolutely would be putting it in all my crypt lists where I can.
Yeah.
Finally, we've got the Tesla Weave, and once per phase, when an enemy unit charges it, on a d6, 2 to 5, the unit takes d3 mortal wounds. On a 6, they take 3 mortal wounds.
Yeah.
This is fine. I don't think I'm ever paying for it. It's definitely the 4th option in the list for me.
I have taken it as my 3rd option over the Auto Divinator because I had Imatech,
Sure.
and I put it on the Chronomancer that I didn't want them getting into. So that then when they did get into it, I just blew up and hurt them a little bit. So it then maybe lessened what they were doing, which was just, it's a win.
Yeah.
It's like when you're on your back foot sort of situation. But
Yeah, I don't mean this negatively.
Yeah.
I prefer to just position that unit in a way that it doesn't ever get charged if possible.
completely.
So
Not
I
always
don't like
possible.
I don't like
Yeah.
spending points for like things have gone wrong plan. But
Yeah.
there's definitely use for it. It's not bad doing
Yeah.
a smite on the
And
charge.
it's a 10-pointer as well, which I think is nice sometimes in list
Yes.
building where you can't get the 15 to
Yeah,
get the
something-
Auto Divinator. That I found sometimes the lists you don't quite line up to get one or the other.
Yeah, 100%. Something to note in here is that all of the enhancements are really cheap. 20 points is too cheap to forward deploy a unit of Wraiths, and all of the rest of them are either at where they are or just a bit cheaper than I would pay for them. It's,
So I think the Space Marine equivalent is 30 points for the Infiltrate.
it could well be. I don't know
Yeah.
off the top of my head, but they are more
It
pricey
is.
than the Marine.
That's off the top of this head.
All right. We're just going to quickly blast through the units to note. If you saw episode 1, you'll have seen them already. We're not going to dig too deeply on them, but this is the detachment that really likes all 3. Wraiths. You put Technomancer in them. They're tanky. They're T6, 4 wounds, 3 up armor save, 4 up invuln, 5 up feel no pain. That's just an incredible stat line. They've got a 10-inch move with fly. I've put 9-inch on there, but it's definitely 10. If they fly over an enemy unit, they do mortal wounds. They have a mediocre damage output, which becomes a pretty okay damage output in this detachment. You're probably not slamming the 2 CP do dev wounds on them. in a desperate situation you might, but they do some damage. They have a pistol, which means if you're in a long, protracted, grindy combat because you're really tanky and don't do loads of damage, doesn't matter. I'm going to be either in the middle of the board or in your deployment zone doing teleport homers, and I'm just going to be scoring points. It's really, really good. And then the Technomancer's healer model within 6 inches for D3 wounds at the end of the movement phase. It doesn't resurrect models, but what it does is the one that you resurrected, heal it up to full. The Nightbringer that's tied up in combat with some Terminators, heal him up D3 wounds. It's just an incredible unit. It's too cheap at 280 points. You can put all of the good enhancements on them. They benefit so well. It's just an absolute winner. Immortals. Join them with a Plasmancer to give exploding fives. Join them with a Chronomancer for fire and fade and -1 to hit. Both of those are good. The more I'm sort of playing around with lists, I think the more I like double Chronomancer. So just putting a Chronomancer in each squad instead of taking a Plasmancer at all, because I like my units staying alive.
And if they've got rerolls anyway.
Yeah, the Plasmancer objectively does more damage,
Yeah.
and that is valuable in some ways. But I think unless you're running the full 30 plus Immortals, I really like keeping them alive. But there is play for a Plasmancer, sorry. So I think you're not wrong to run one. You can put the Translocation Shroud Overlord in there, which is a flat 6-inch advance. You could give them, put 30 of them around Illuminator Xeris, who gives them effectively Armor of Contempt, -1 AP on incoming attacks, and then +1 AP on their outgoing attacks. Really valuable with Solar Pulse. Suddenly you can start punching through targets that you wouldn't think you'd be able to with Strength 5 AP0 1 damage weapons. Really good. They've got an incredible volume of firepower. They're very tanky if you use them in the correct way. For example, if you've got Chronomancers, Xeris, cover, all of these things you can stack on top of them. And as we said before, you get average of 11 mortal wounds per squad if you're using them with the Plasmancer. Yeah, and then the Plasmancer does some mortal wounds with his stick as well, and you just kill things that don't want to be killed. Final unit a note, they're not as affected by the detachment. They're not particularly affected at all, but they are still really good. You're probably going to run 2 or 3 of them, in my opinion. They're incredibly tanky. T11, 12 wounds, 4 up invuln, 5 up feel no pain, half incoming damage. They are slow. They've only got a 6-inch move. They do tend to have a low range on their shooting output. However, they also have, OC4, really solid. Transcendent Catan can advance, and if it does, instead of rolling in advance, it can just teleport, redeploy it 9 inches away from enemy units. Really strong.
So good.
Nightbringer has really high damage output and then does mortal wounds at the end of the fight phase. Void Dragon, more effective into vehicles, also heals if it's within 12 inches of a vehicle at the start of the shooting phase. All really solid additions. You can run pretty much any configuration. Nightbringer is probably the best, but there is an argument for running just 2 Transcendents if you want to play a more mobile style. Really valuable units to have in as well, just backing up the rest of your stuff. So, this is the list that we have sort of settled on as a good take all comers. This is a lot more of John's handiwork than mine. I very much like to pick one unit, focus down on it, take the max that I can. That's more my style of list building. But this is sort of Cryptek good stuff. All of the units are here are great. You can add or take stuff away. The scoring units you could definitely tweak if you had more points. Wraiths you could run more. Immortals you could run more. Doomstalkers you could run more or less. Catan you can tweak those to flavor. It's just a very flexible detachment. All of the units here you can sort of add more or less and be happy with how you're doing. So we've got 2 units of Wraiths, both with Technomancers. One of them's got the Dimensional Sanctum, gives them the Infiltrate, forward deploy. Then we've got 2 units of Immortals, one with a Chronomancer, one with a Plasmancer. The Chronomancer has got the 2-up gain a CP when your opponent gains a CP from one of their abilities. So that's the unit that you tend to play more cagey with. You try and just get some value out of. The Plasmancer squad is, I'm going to try and find a fire angle, blow up some very important target, or maybe even rapid ingress it in, or walk it on from the side of the board in your turn, depending on what the deployment is.
Yeah.
Overlord with Translocation Shroud, that can go with either unit. I think in this setup, I like it with the Plasmancer. Just move the unit 11 inches, find an angle, blow something up, and then hopefully get it back to safety where you can. We've got 2 Catan. Transcendent Catan, very valuable in this list, being able to get around the board, You can even use it for doing, for example, if you've gone behind enemy lines and teleport homers, turn one, if you're playing on Dawn of War and your opponent's running something like Custodes or a lower model count army where they're not able to screen out very well, you can potentially put it in your opponent's deployment turn one, just get 8 points on the secondaries. Then they have an incredibly hard to deal with unit to worry about. Nightbringer as well, small base, which isn't why you should pick it, but it is very valuable. It turns out it's a lot easier to hide it. It's got great output. It's just if you get it into melee, it is going to kill whatever it looks at within reason. Obviously, it's not going to kill a full squad of 10 Terminators, but any big, tough individual model is absolutely going to fall over to it. It's probably the best one in the mirror, I would say, as well. If you're trying to hunt down other Catan, it's quite nice for that. Then we've got the 2 units of mortals previously mentioned attached to the Technomancers, the decks. 2 units of Wraiths. Gone for the claws and the particle casters. Particle casters are very solid at doing actions. You can run fixed with this list very easily. So if you're doing, for example, teleport homers and behind enemy lines, or teleport homers and cleanse, really nice to be able to just charge into the middle of the board, stand there, do some actions, and not worry about the having to score your points while you're tying up your opponent and scoring the primary as well. Finally, we've got 2 Doomstalkers, very good in this detachment. They only hit on 4s natively. However, because of the reroll aura, if they're in the locus of control, especially if you just put them in your own deployment zone, you're getting quite valuable shooting output. They also overwatch on 5s. You're not going to do that every time, but if you've got full hit rerolls and you're overwatching on 5s, you get a surprising amount of output from a unit that shouldn't necessarily be able to do that much damage in your opponent's turn. And then we've got the scoring units. 5 Death Marks and 5 Hexmark Destroyers. You can swap these around. I really like a unit of Flayed ones for forward deploy. I like Tesla Tomb Blades. Advance and do actions, have a scout move before the game, just very fast and mobile. There's a lot of different ways you can go with that. What were your sort of thoughts behind the list design, John, when you've been playing around with it?
So I've kind of toyed around with a few options because you're actually a bit spoilt for choice for scoring units. So a lot of it is down to preference and playstyle, I think. So there's the argument to maybe take scarabs. So if you want to have the small little blobs that are just going and doing the actions, downside is obviously they don't have any OC unless they're next to a Cryptek. Obviously, Death Marks gives you a different kind of thing there. The Flayed ones, and also I still really like things like the Tomb Blades because they've got the mobility. If you're making them mobile, you don't worry about giving them the shield veins. You just give them the shadow looms, so they're -1 to hit. They're moving 12 inches. They're just pesky. They're small bases because they're 32 mil
That's
base
correct, yeah.
flying bases. So a unit of 3 of them, and the shooting's not much to be kind of sniffed at either. And if you give one of them the assault weapon, which is the
Tesla.
twin Tesla carbines minimum, you've suddenly got assault weapons. So they're going essentially 18 inches up to 18 inches and can still do an action.
Yeah.
And
And
it's
if you
just
don't need
that
them to do an
flexibility.
action, if you don't need them to do an action, they fire and fade.
Yeah.
So they're really good for getting behind enemy lines. Turn 2, potentially, depending on the board setup, you can. There's a lot of play with them.
Yeah. It's
I
a
think
lot
they're my
of movement.
yeah, I think they're my favorite scoring unit, but they are also 10 points more than Death Marks. The main draw in this list was that Death Marks were the cheapest that you can put in.
And the biggest consideration to deter people from them is they're horrible to build.
I put together 5 2 nights ago, and I didn't have much issue, but maybe I'm just dealt differently. With that said, thank you very much for watching episode 2. I think the Canoptek Court is a great place to start. If you're interested in playing Necrons, this is absolutely where I'd recommend putting in, your first 5-10 games, getting used to how the army plays. If you decide that there are other angles that you enjoy, if you want to play more of a cagey style, like the Hypercrypt, well, just wait until next week, and we will have a new episode 3, coming for you then. Bye.